In the words of our esteemed poet laureate, Ryan Eric King, don't cry for Martine, Argentina. Welcome back to Motorsport 101. He very kindly let me have that one for free. I can't possibly imagine why. I'm Dre Harrison. Welcome to episode 570 of Motorsport 101. Glad you could join us as ever for another edition of Our Bikes.
Our bikes.
Our bikes.
Don't just think about the bikes. Don't think about anything else. Just think about the bikes.
The bikes happened again at the Grand Prix of Argentina. Well, Marc Marquez is him again.
Our bikes!
It happened again. Marquez, very dominant across the course of the weekend. The first rider to go perfect in the first two rounds of a championship, and by perfect I mean pole, win, and fastest lap. The treble, the back-to-back treble to start this season. First time it's happened since Jack Doohan's dad in 1995. It's been 30 years since someone has been this perfect to start the season. And we didn't even have the sprint back then. And oh wait, Marc Marquez has won both of those too. It's been a Marquez brothers fan fest for the first couple of rounds here in MotoGP 2025. And we're here to talk about it, as ever. Mr. Cameron Buckley. Hello, Cam.
You need to peel them off of that desktop. You need to peel them off the Ducati media.
Sorry. Ducati has posted pictures. If you remember last year's Mugello Ducati livery, the blue one with the Italian tricolor, well, they're making a production Panigale V4.
You need to get them off that media site.
I need to buy more money.
Don't we all? We need to grow more money. We need to make
grow
money
more money. You know who doesn't need more of anything right now? The Marquez brothers, who I'm sure have a blood alcohol point close to the horsepower of their motorcycles.
I don't know, man. I think knowing y'all, I don't think they need less of anything. In fact, I think they need more.
The only thing we need more of is clips of those two dancing like a couple of goofy cartoon characters in the garage.
Oh, yeah. Bust the move, baby. Bust the move.
My God. In the words of Captain Holt, vindication!
We had to wait 73 years for a pair of brothers to finish a MotoGP race 1 and 2. We've had 2 in a fortnight from the Marquez brothers. Marc ahead of Alex again. Alex has been second on everything that's mattered so far this season. So we'll talk about Marquez versus Marquez round 2. Marquez harder. We'll talk about where Pecco fits into all of this because he didn't even get on the podium. In the Grand Prix on this one. He finished a lowly 4th behind Franco Morbidelli. Remember him?
Frankie Morbidelli back.
Franco back. His first podium in 1,414 days. It's been nearly 4 years since the last time Franco Morbidelli had a Grand Prix podium finish. And we get to talk about it. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about where Pecco fits in, Ogura, and an unfortunate case of the disqualifications. We'll talk about that shortly as well. Jorge Martin, and latest on his wrist injuries and how he's going to be out for a little bit longer than anticipated. There's a bit of a political fight in regards to that. It's worth talking about as well. And, well, Argentina might be done on the calendar. We'll talk about that a little bit more as well as we talk for the next 45 minutes or so all about MotoGP. But here's where you can find us in the meantime. YouTube.com/Motorsport 101. We're on Facebook at /Motorsport 101. We're on Twitter at Motorsport_101. Our personal handles on Blue Sky. If you want to follow us personally, are Dre Harrison, RJ O'Connell, and cbuckley917.bsky.social. You can follow the pod on Instagram at Motorsport101pod and check out the website, motorsport101.com, for all of our details and written articles on top of that too, including full reviews of this race, all the news in MotoGP, and Formula One's Grand Prix in Australia, and some extra words on me and Isaac Hadj's embrace with Anthony Hamilton. Well worth a read if you haven't checked that out already. And of course, you can get all of that early if you subscribe to us on Patreon, patreon.com/Motorsport 101. $5 gets you early access to all of our content. You can upgrade to the $10 tier to listen to these episodes live as they're being recorded, as Jason and Ghost Raptor are doing so right now. Thanks for listening, gents, as ever. Hope you enjoy the show. Right, without further ado, let's get into the Grand Prix of Argentina.
It was deja vu for the Marquez brothers as they went at it head-to-head again for the Argentina Grand Prix victory. Only this time, after Marc won the sprint casually, Alex took the early lead, and Marc had to figure out a way around. This wasn't about tire pressures, no. Marc tried and failed a couple times, including nearly losing the rear at turn 10, but Marc eventually got there with 5 laps to go, and he pulled away for the victory, the first man to go perfect in the first 2 rounds since Mick Dewitt in 1995. As Dre mentioned, and with it, Marc Marquez's 9th Grand Prix win across all categories, tying it for 3rd all-time with the great Angel Nieto, because 12 plus 1 is unlucky for some.
12 plus 1 equals 90. This is not Balatro. This is the only time where this math makes sense. Yes, he's now... Marc Marquez is now 3rd all-time on the wins. He's 3rd all-time on the podium list. He now has 1 more Grand Prix podium than Danny Pedrosa had by the time his career was said and done. The only 2 men above him, you can probably guess, Valentino Rossi and Giacomo Agostini. Those 2 legends of their own right. As mentioned, first time since 1995 that a rider has been perfect through the first 2 rounds of the season. Every session that's mattered, Marquez has topped one way or another. And Cam, well, he had to work a little harder for this one. I say a little because it literally is a little. But Marc found the way to win again. And it's looking ominous for the way this season's playing out.
It's what he does, isn't it? I mean, it wasn't quite as much of a joke as it was in the first race, because we recorded this after Ducati put out, their original press, recap of the weekend on YouTube. And Marc was talking about how in Thailand last week, he wasn't pushing hard enough. He had so much margin, he couldn't get the front tire temperature up to get the pressures up.
Right.
It was a piss take. That whole weekend was a joke. This one was a little bit closer. That said, when Marc finally did get around Alex, he put 9/10 on him in 2 laps.
Yeah.
He was only getting clubbed by almost half a second a lap. So, yeah, there is no competitive prospect for the season on current evidence. That evidence might change. Pecco will hope that evidence changes in Qatar, because at the moment, yeesh.
Yeah, this was another... It was a display where Marc Marquez never really felt like he was going to lose again on this one. I mean, last time out was similar in a sense, but this one, I mean, okay, it felt a little bit closer because Marc made a genuine error at turn 1. He let Alex back through. It wasn't a huge mistake. It was just a small running...
A little wide.
Went a little wide at turn 1, let Alex through, and then Marc spent 16 laps trying to get around him, couldn't quite do it. He tried once with 8 to go, actually ran on at the bottom of the hill at turn 4, couldn't quite get it stuck. He nearly lost the rear through turn 10 in the latter stages as well. The rear was spinning up the street.
There was a couple corners where he had that thing looking like the old Honda, endoing as he was trying to get on the power. But he eventually got through and never really looked back. And those 2 chased each other away at the front of this grid, and no one could see really which way they went by the end of that race. Marc is currently perfect on points going into round 3. Wonder if he'll like that track. Oh, it's Coda.
His other home round.
Yes.
Where he had 6 consecutive wins between 2013 and 19.
Where the thing that stopped him from dominating that race was a engine electronics failure.
Which would have made it 7 straight wins at Kota. Okay.
Where he had race-winning pace on that god-awful 2022 Honda. Yes, so he could conceivably leave Kota 3 for 3 perfect on all points available.
That'll be bad news for everybody involved, in particular teammate Pecco Bagnaia, who is already 31 points behind.
Are you trying to show that he's cooked?
A word similar to that, because that's a position that Pecco Bagnaia is in at this point in time within the Ducati camp.
Yeah. Not great.
An empty chair at the table. Like Ducati and Gresini had a combined celebration, and you just imagine Pecco being the guy in the corner not talking to anybody.
He's the guy at the corner watching. He's in the chair that's at the foot of the hotel bed. If you know, you know.
Yeah, he's the guy in the back of the school disco who's not interested. He's here to be socially disactive and trade Pokemon cards with his other nerdy friend in the corner. That's what this felt like. I mean, Pecco Bagnaia.
Yeah, only he just opened a pack and he got jack shit.
Of course, typical. She should have kept it sealed. Anyway, Bagnaia finished 5.5 seconds behind Marquez on the road. He finished 4th in the Grand Prix, was beaten straight up by Franco Morbidelli. We'll talk about him in a minute. And he's already now 31 points behind Marc Marquez in the championship standings.
It's not Sergio Perez because Franco Morbidelli, 1, has a proven track record of success, and 2, is not performing so bad that he's costing the factory Ducati team the team's championship. But it's not a good look.
The one thing we've always said about Pecco that might be a problem in the long run might be what happens when he has a quality teammate, and Marc Marquez has rolled up and has cleaned his clock.
There's not much higher quality than Marc Marquez when he can keep his limbs attached.
It's a problem.
That's it. Like, what we've always said about Pecco is that he leaves the door open. He leaves the door open for people to beat him, and sometimes people screw up just as bad. Jorge Martin constantly for the last 2 years. But then he does also start seasons slow. If Pecco gets to Qatar and he's cooked like this in Qatar, alarm bell should be ringing on side 63.
Yeah, I was going to say, after Kota, we have arguably 2 of Bagnaia's 3 best tracks, in my opinion. Qatar, and then you've got Jerez. He's won the last 3 Spanish Grand Prix in a row. If Bagnaia is still playing second fiddle to Marquez after those 2 rounds, people are going to start the fraud watch accusations, and that's unfair on Pecco, because at the end of the day, you can only beat who they put in front of you, and it's not Pecco's fault that Marquez was either injured, on an uncompetitive bike, or both during his main title winning seasons or challenges.
Cam will tell you he was a big Pecco Bagnaia guy before he was mainstream.
Yeah, when I was the believer when he had a couple not great years to kick things off, broke his leg very early on when he really could have won a race very early in his career. But he's not comfortable with how they've got the bike set up right now, because again, it is kind of a GP 24.69 right now.
Nice.
Where it's got the 2025 swing arm and some odds and ends. They changed the wiring harness on the engine. They've changed a couple things around, but still fundamentally, it's not that different from last year's bike. He's thinking about ditching this year's components entirely and going back to end of season spec GP24, because he just doesn't have the feel from the rear tire right now. The problem for him is that, as has been proven by, we have a big sample size with Marc. Marc will kind of just throw his leg over the bike and ride whatever they give him.
You can handle it.
And at the very worst, he's still going to be fast. Mark doesn't really have the weekends where he's not at the races. Either he's at the races and winning, or he probably turns that motorcycle into a pile of scrap.
And the funny thing about that is, Marc Marquez hasn't crashed a motorcycle so far this season.
Yeah, he is. That's how you know he still has more margin. Because Marc Marquez developed the technique of, I'm going to go out and practice. I'm going to find where the limit is. Dumps the bike. Okay, that's where the limit is. That's where I can't push past.
Yeah.
This was that guy. And he's looked, other than a couple moments during the race, he looks completely in control. It's very weird to call Marc Marquez smooth this year. Yeah. Marc Marquez is not a smooth rider. Marc Marquez is having a fist fight with the motorcycle all the way through the corner rider.
Yeah.
And he looked completely smooth and in control in Thailand. Once he got to the front here, again, kind of riding within himself, yet still had huge margin. There's going to be a situation at some point this year where Mark has to go at 10 tenths. And as we know, Mark can occasionally hit 12 to 13 tenths and then refill the gravel traps.
I think it's a hard ask to get anybody other than MM93 to lead laps at Coda next time out.
Yeah, just about the only thing that he isn't doing on a weekend basis is grand slamming the field.
I think that's going to happen.
I think it will happen somewhere, and there's a good chance it happens next weekend because he is untouchable at Kota.
I'm thinking Sachsenring. I am terrified to see what happens at the Sachsenring.
Good God. Well, yeah, what I would say to that is that Bagnaia it would be a damning indictment of Ducati and what they've done in terms of bike development if Bagnaia gives up on what they've done with development of this bike entirely. And you know what? It's probably going to be tempting for them to do that when Bagnaia just got beaten by two dudes on the same 24 package that he's trying to ride on right now, Alex Marquez and Franco Morbidelli.
Not even. It's an Austria spec GP24, so it's not even end of season spec. And Alex has looked like a duck in water the whole time on that bike. He's been practically... The only thing that he hasn't been is Marc Marquez. Franco Morbidelli just had his best weekend in 4 years.
Holy shit. Franco Morbidelli, I'm so happy he's gotten back to this point. There have been many times where I thought this dude's career was effectively over. And you know what? I know he's on the best bike. I know that. I know he's on a Ducati. I know. That's the expectation. But, man... this could be going a lot worse, and it looks like for the first time in a long time, he feels comfortable on a MotoGP.
Could be a lot worse than defeating a two-time champion on the same basic machine.
Absolutely, man.
On a human level, it's hard not to talk about Frankie without talking about the cruciate ligament tear that he had. You know, his cruciate ligament he tore back in 2021. He's never quite been the same rider since then. The huge head injury he suffered at the start of last preseason, even, let alone season, which hampered him all through 2024. And the fact that a lot of people, understandably, were reluctant to put him in the VR46 setup because they thought he might be toasted as a rider entirely. And right now, after 2 race weekends, he is 4th in the Riders' Championship and only 6 points behind Pecco Bagnaia, the 2-time MotoGP world champion. Like, that is a great sign that Frankie is back to something near his best. And I've said it before, Franco is one of the genuinely good people in the paddock. I'm lucky to work with people now that have got to know him and have been in the paddock. They speak glowingly of how good a person Franco Morbidelli is. And how he's a real, pro's pro, a rider's rider. Everybody likes him. He keeps it real. He's not one of these big ego dudes. He's not got a flash car or anything like that. He's a ridiculously humble and just well-liked human being. And honestly, that's all you need in motorsport sometimes.
You'd have to search very far in any motorcycle paddock to find someone who won't glowingly praise that guy. And it has been a very long, very hard road back for him from the knee injury. And to see him give it to Pecco and then ride away he kind of ended up having a lonely race. Unfortunately, a lot of lonely races because other than at the front, there wasn't a lot going on again, racing product-wise. I have to take a moment. Second best manufacturer of MotoGP.
Honda are second in the Manufacturers' Championship after Johann Zarco finished 6th. And we have
Johann Zarco got that bike on the front row.
Front row in qualifying, what was it, 5th in the sprint and then 6th in the Grand Prix? What?
Exactly as the form book predicted at the end of last year.
Yep.
Absolutely. You know what? With nothing but heart, grit, determination, and
the GDP of Japan.
Yeah.
Yes.
My God, Johann Zarco was balling all weekend from the minute he climbed onto that bike. I know Ryan Eric King is sick right now.
He hates that man. He hates that man, everything he stands for. He's probably over there in New York saying, fuck the horse you rode it on. Because Zarco, we talked about this last year, about how he was putting Honda on his back in the worst of their development struggle. And yes, you could make a very fair argument that Honda is just ran a little bit above average here in Argentina. Zarco loves Argentina. He's gone well here in years past, finished on the podium. Very nearly got his first top flight win in Argentina back in 2016, but he was second to Cal Crutchlow in that famous "Don't Doubt Me" race win that Crutchlow had.
Look, Honda can go above average all they want. The average is like upper mid right now. This is a win for us.
They had 3 bikes in the top 10, Cam. Like, that's a great result for them, given where they were last year. Like, Honda is...
where they were last year was like the worst racing vehicle in a open development sport.
Luca Marini now looks like the rider that got this job.
Johan Mir now looks like a rider who can actually keep the damn bike upright.
They are in there actually competed and playing with Aprilia and Ducati in some instances. Like, that is exactly where Honda needs to be right now, where on a good day they can compete with the very best in this sport. Let's not forget, Morbidelli's on a GP24. DG Antonio is on a 24.9 spec as we speak right now. Like, they could see Pecco Bagnaia further up the road, who is on up to date. At least he's Pecco Bagnaia. What more needs to be said?
Look, they were getting punched in the face by 2 to 2.5 seconds a lap at times last year. They can now see the lead fight.
Right.
I wouldn't have bet. You could not have convinced me with any degree of money, time machines, fiction of any type that they would have been even close to mid this year, let alone currently second in the constructors, let alone getting bikes into the top 10 on merit.
Right.
Especially when you look at like Yamaha were awful this weekend. They were slow in the sprint. They were not very good in qualifying, and Fabio Quartararo carried damage from the first lap and was nowhere.
Yeah.
In the main Grand Prix.
Yamaha looks like they now might be wooden spoon candidates at the bottom of the field right now compared to everybody else. KTM are not great, but at least KTM can get in the top 8. That's something.
And then there's Aprilia.
And then
there's Aprilia, because we got 2 ways to go about this. We have Ogura, who's doing so well in Argentina until he wasn't.
Well, he kept doing well in Argentina until he had probably left Argentina, because for those who watched the race and then never followed anything else, he was disqualified for a non-conforming software spec on his ECU. After the crash he had this weekend, his bike was rebuilt. His bike had the wrong firmware in it and that ECU, and he was canned.
Yeah, just to clarify some things here, because a lot of people don't know their wheel, and every podcast is somebody's first. The ECU on a MotoGP bike is a standardized part. Everybody has the same in this instance. In this case, after Ogura, as Cam mentioned, had that crash, they had to rebuild it. And as a result of that rebuild, They put in the wrong spec, and there's no performance advantage to be gained from doing that. It was a spec of EC that they used in testing originally.
It was testing firmware. It was really just the version number was different.
Exactly, but it was a version spec that was not ratified by Dorna as part of the homologation rules, and as a result, it's a technical regulation breach, and at that point, you have to be DQ'd. It's just, so I just want to exonerate Trackhouse from any talk or allegations that they may have cheated. It wasn't that. It was just an unfortunate accident more than anything else from the crew in the back. They made an honest mistake, and unfortunately, through no fault of Ogura, they've been punished for it, and it sucks for them. And it's a shame because Ogura was 8th. Again, he was having a really...
genuinely great.
Yeah, another really, really good day on the Aprilia. He's right up there with some of the very strongest riders in the sport right now, and he had his points taken away for it, which is really unfortunate. And as a direct result, no points. And because of that, the only reason Aprilia left the Grand Prix with a point at all was because Raul Fernandez got bumped up into 15th place as a result of Ogura's disqualification. So Aprilia left the Grand Prix with 1 point as a manufacturer because Bez took himself out at turn 1 and Lorenzo Savadori didn't take part in the race at all because he popped his shoulder out trying to save himself from crashing.
Yep, tried to save a high side and he would have been better off crashing the bike.
That's nuts, man.
It's not going great for, anyone but Ducati and somehow HRC right now. KTM, well,
we know it's not great.
Not at the races, to say the least. I don't know what to make of KTM at this point. They appear to be still pretty, is this it? Is this your king?
Is this it? That's my first thought when I look at the standings and I go, best KTM was Brad Binder. Again, he was 7th place, but he was 14 seconds off the win. Acosta was behind him. He looked a bit struggly this weekend. He didn't look like a guy that was anywhere near his best. And the Tech Threes were nowhere to be found. Bastianini was taken out by Raul Fernandez early on, and Maverick Vinales was 12th, 22 seconds off the win. KTM are too big a manufacturer in the context of MotoGP to be this mid. They're not terrible, they're just mid.
Well, they have taken what feels like a definitive step back from last year, and they're still having the same rear chatter problems. If anything, they're actually worse as they've continued to load the bike up with aerodynamics. And at best, they can kind of see some of the private Ducatis. At worst, they're fighting with Yamaha.
Do you think this problem would be a little less unbearable if their budget was a little more sorted out?
It just feels like it's carried over all the same problems as last year's bike. If anything, going further down their development path has made them worse.
Yeah.
And by comparison, Ducati have none of the rear tire chatter problems that plagued all of their bikes last year. So they're reaping all of the benefit and none of the downside. And KTM are literally and figuratively spinning their wheels. And Yamaha are frankly, all of that preseason promise dead and buried after 2 rounds, and KTM are right there with them.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's like
Jorge Martin latest.
Jorge Martin confirmed before the weekend started that he is out for the United States Grand Prix at COTA and Qatar. I was going to say Qatar's 50-50, but Martin has spoken to MotoGP.com today, and he's confident that he'll be aiming for Qatar. He's aiming for round 4 to be his first of the year. Look, if there was any doubt beforehand, it is now. Martin will not be retaining the championship this year. A real shame that his season was effectively over before it even really started. It's a damn shame.
Yeah, you want to see the best riders out there competing with one another, and Martin is the defending champion, but no longer allowed to defend. The good news, I guess, There's no real rush to get him back, so he can and really should be taking the time to heal 100% and come back 100%, because then the learning begins on his new motorcycle, because he just didn't get a lot of time in preseason with that injury.
Right, and it's a development year for Aprilia now at this point. They have not got a title contending bullet in the chamber. Bez has been pretty poor to start the season, relatively speaking. He's been very erratic in how he's ridden that bike in Grand Prix spec. And Martin is going to be at least 3 weekends behind, maybe 4, depending if he can get through catalogs. We don't know how that's going to play out. What's been interesting, Cam, is that Aprilia have put it out there saying, hey, could we get Jorge Martin a private test before he comes back from injury? Did you notice this in the press?
I did. I'm sure Ducati, who have dealt with this, and Honda, who have heavily dealt with this, will be fully supportive. Oh, they're going to get laughed out of the fucking room if they bring that to arbitration.
All I will say is, I think it's adorable that Aprilia ignored the conventional process of going through the Grand Prix commission and trying to get this put through, and they instead blabbed to the media about this idea.
Yeah, that's really going to endear all of the rule makers to you, isn't it?
But it got Marc Marquez to agree. That's cool, right?
A man who shattered arm and then re-shattered arm and then surgically re-shattered arm agrees. Oh boy, because he had to go on. It's lucky for Mark that Honda made a MotoGP bike that you could buy. So when he came back, he could go on something somewhat resembling his MotoGP machine.
Yeah.
Not that it really made a huge amount of difference. I actually agree with Aprilia, but they're not going to get that in a month of Sundays.
Yeah, look, I'm all for it. I think looking after the riders that we have is a good thing, and getting them back up to speed in a more comfortable setting, I think, is something that I think we should all get behind. Marc Marquez went to the press and agreed, saying that, yeah, I think looking after riders is ultimately a good idea, just not this year. It was a key piece of wording that he used when describing it, saying not 2025. It's something that I think Ducati's not released an official statement, but Davide Tardozzi did say to the media that no, we're not agreeing with this year, but maybe 26 is what they basically said.
Well, because they had to deal with that with Bastianini when he broke his shoulder.
Yeah, when he broke his shoulder. He missed 5 rounds.
Yeah.
You know,
and he wasn't allowed to get MotoGP bike time. So I agree with the idea. It's just you have to be realistic, and it is not happening.
And the problem is as well, and David Emmett made this point on Blue Sky as well. One of the best in the biz, David Emmett. Check him out on the Paddock Boss podcast as ever. But he made the point. If this is an independent team who has a rider crash, they can't afford to have a private test. So once again, it's a move that favors the big factories. Is that good? Is that what you want? Probably not.
Exactly why it's one of the big factories asking for it.
Yeah, because it benefits them. And if it's someone like VR46 or Trackhouse, they probably won't be able to afford to write a private test to get one of their riders back up to speed. So
not comfortably, at least.
No. So look, it's a nice idea, but I think there's too many logistical problems that would get in the way of this being able to be pulled off, like financially, politically. How long an injury are we talking before you're allowed a test? How many rounds do you have to miss? You know, that sort of logic or along those lines. You know, there's a lot of red tape you'd have to get ironed out to make this happen. So I'm not convinced that we're going to ever be at a point where you can feasibly run private tests for the sake of injury. It's a nice thought, but I just can't see enough of the sport bending their wills to make that happen, personally. One more piece of news before we get out of here. Argentina as a round might be done.
Might be.
There's a lot of murmurs within the paddock that this was Argentina's last Grand Prix. That Brazil,
I thought Javier Milei saved the race and the economy.
Well, he's half right. The race was saved, and the turnout was great, by the way. I need to point this out. 200,000 plus over the weekend in Argentina, 80,000 on race day. Like, I need to point this out, why this is important. Termas Rio del Hondo is hours away from Buenos Aires. It is a bitch to get to. It is literally in the middle of nowhere. There's only normally, I think it's 2 flights a week that get anywhere near the track. They had to up it to, I think, 5 or 6 just to get everybody in MotoGP in and out of the area safely. In other words, this is a bitch of a race to get to, right? And despite that, they had 80,000 fans roll up on race day. Silverstone would kill for those numbers. Like, they would jump off a bridge right now if it meant they could get 80,000 through the door at Silverstone. They would go nuts for that. So it's a hugely popular round of the local community. The Argentinians love their bikes. They want this round to stick around. Clearly, there's demand for it. But MotoGP's looked at Brazil like the new girlfriend. I mean, looking behind them like, ooh. And is going, hey, a Grand Prix in Brazil because it's Brazil.
Right. Yeah, and removed from the context of soccer, in terms of motorsport, we all know Brazil is a sexier racing nation than Argentina.
Yeah, I think we should take this track and push it somewhere else because it would be a damn shame to lose this track. It's a damn shame to lose this track a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
It's, for me, it's one of my absolute favorites on the MotoGP calendar, but logistically, it's a bit of a disaster. And didn't they have to fly in more planes to get everyone out of there?
They did. They did, yeah. They did. It's a logistical nightmare of around Argentina, but it's a very popular one. Like, there's clearly a demand for it. It's like I will tell you for free, half the rounds on the calendar would jump up and down for an 80,000 race day attendance. I'll tell you that for free.
Yeah.
It's double what Silverstone pulled last year. Which goes to show you that, you know, our bikes are popular in more parts of the world. And as far as I'm concerned, we have 5 Grand Prix in the Iberian Peninsula if you include Portimao. Why can't we have both? Why can't we have Argentina and Brazil on the MotoGP calendar? Why can't we have 2 rounds in South America?
This one isn't going to be a disaster to get everyone in and out of, and that's not the track's fault, which is a damn shame.
It is a damn shame. And you know, I resent it greatly because I want calendars to be more diverse, generally speaking. Yeah. And I think it's a crying shame we only have 1 Grand Prix in South America. I'd like it to be 2, personally. I remember growing up in the days when we raced at the Nelson Piquet circuit in Brazil. It was cool as shit. It was a great track, and it produced many great races. It was a title deciding round back in the day as well. I used to love that about the circuit at Nelson Piquet. It's about the only thing I like about Nelson Piquet. Look,
the circuit's great. Why should the circuit have to change? He's the one who sucks.
Exactly. But we'll have to wait and see. I spoke to a couple of people from the Latin American division of motorsport.com. They're on the fence, is what they're saying. It's like 50-50 whether Argentina survives or not. So we're going to have to wait and see. Fingers crossed.
Great odds.
Those aren't great odds. Brazil will be there no matter what, but a lot of people are saying it's going to be a direct replacement for Argentina. So we'll see. I still stand by the fact that I think there's no reason why we can't have both, but we'll have to wait and see. That'll do it for this episode of Motorsport 101. Next MotoGP race is COTA, the circuit of the Americas. Marquez land. He's already won in the Premier class 6 times already between 2013 and 18. Can he make it the Magnificent 7? We'll have to wait and see at the end of the weekend. There's a good chance that's happening. We'll have to wait and see. Until then, we'll be back next week for our Formula One review in China and IndyCar's return to the Thermal Club.
Coachella sucks this year.
I've been Dre Harrison. He's been RJ O'Connell and Cam Buckley. Thank you very much for listening. Sayonara.
Later, y'all.
This weekend has done nothing to dissuade me from me thinking Ducati are going perfect on the year.